Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare.
All right, good to see you all. Happy Wednesday, Beth. Been a while. So good to have you here as well. And sitting here, oops, get that clicked up. Our Wednesday night teaching. Welcome. Hi. So, rumor has it we'll be talking about compassion today. The whole of the Buddhist teachings, ultimately, when you think about the path we talked about last week, is he talked about how do we remove suffering. Okay, so that's the Buddhist path. What's compassion? The desire to remove suffering. So here we have imbued in the totality of the teachings is a motivation of compassion, a desire, not only to remove our suffering, but the suffering of all others as well when we get to this idea of bodhicitta. And so in the text, we're at this part where we're bringing in the importance of compassion and the scope that we want to expand it out to. And we began last week with understanding the very nature of the prison we're already in. So we went through the 3 types of suffering. Curious if anyone tried to drink out of a cup they didn't like. Just that attachment, here's the cups I like, and here's the cups I don't like. And then, I have to drink out of this one. It's just a cup, it's just a cup. And we start to look at some of the struggles that we have in our hearts and minds around activities and things that we're doing or how people treat us. And we discover that things that we're very attached to are also the source of almost all of our stress and suffering. I worry about this. I don't want this to be. I want that to happen. And I was in a meeting last night, and this young lady, she's waiting for this decision, right? A decision. She's going to get that call. Middle of March. It's the middle of March. And, it was just fascinating because she's so clear on her own struggle and her own resiliency around it. She started catching herself thinking, well, if I get into too much acceptance that, if it doesn't happen, I'm kind of like making it not happen. So she's like worrying that if I get into too much acceptance, well, then it's not going to happen. I need to want it to make it happen. And then, but if I want it too much, then it's not going to happen. And there's just this thing that has been going on in her mind for days. And I think probably all of us can relate to how much time and energy we can put into really needing this thing to happen. I was talking to someone else, actually it was this morning, where, I'm waiting for the shoe to drop, but it's not just any shoe, it's the big shoe, right? It's the big shoe. It's what it's all about. And how real it can seem in the moment. And then the shoe drops or doesn't drop, and, then it's Tuesday. And here we are, one more day. And now I've got something else to worry about, or to desire, or to attach to, or to, protect. And so if we start, noticing in our own minds how much of our mental and emotional suffering has very little to do with the events, but how I'm identifying with them, how I'm attaching to them, how I'm attributing my happiness to them or my suffering to them. Sometimes we can step out and kind of see it and go, it's kind of ridiculous. And then an hour later, man, I'm all in, it's just because it's so big. And so we noticed this, we talked about it last week on this internal struggle we have just around the suffering of change. And then we got into the pervasive suffering. There's the conditioning, our very conditioning. And got into, how do we really remove all this? How do we be clear of this? And so in the text, they were very clear that removing they're called bakchaks in Tibetan, these karmic imprints, these habits and tendencies from our mind, the base level of mind. When that's clear, we're free, right? Clear light mind, this stream of consciousness going lifetime to lifetime. Once that's clear, we get clear, but it's actually breaking through that is how we become free, totally free. So we may not have a whole lot of experience with that right now. So we begin where we are, which is understanding that in my own life, I'm a prisoner so much of my thoughts and my feelings and my conditioning. And even though I may want to be a good partner, I might yell at my own partner. Even someone was sharing this at another event, kind of throwing the computer mad, with a partner. And we can do that, right? The people that we love and care about, we can get really worked up over. Someone that we, dearly loved, we can't be in a room with. Someone we can't be in a room with, we get to know a little bit. And, I understand their struggles and their sufferings. I can be there. But all of this is very conditional. And sometimes I can't even sit next to another human being because I have resentment towards them or I find them annoying. And 10-hour car ride with that person you find annoying. And we're just sitting next to another human being, just trying to find their way just like I am. And so we start to recognize that this suffering I have, this conditioning that I have, that even though I may choose to want to be a certain way, I'm often incapable of doing that. And then for a short-term happiness, engage in activities that I intellectually know are not going to suit me very well. And then we have the good old, what was the term we used last week? Cognitive dissonance. Here's what I know to be true and valuable, and here's what I do. And they're not the same thing. So that becomes the prison that we find ourselves in. And so as Holiness was walking us through this to get us to a point that just as we're in a prison, so is everyone else. That's the foundation from which we can engage in this path, is recognizing that we're all in this together, that nobody decided to, when they were a little kid, to wake up and be a flaming jerk. That's just not how it works. That fundamentally people are trying to find a way to be okay. And a lot of people are less fortunate than many of us who haven't had the opportunities, the teachers, the guidance, the care, the love that we've been able to receive to be in this room today or online today. And in truth, that doesn't make us better than anyone. It makes us more fortunate than many. And so understanding that I'm in this, what we call samsara, this conditioned existence, and I'd like to get out. I'd like to learn what it's like to truly be free of this. So is everyone else stuck. So when we get there, we get to this part of the text. So at first, we understand samsara and awakening in terms of our own dukkha, right? Our own suffering. That's what we've been talking about, this conditioning, and our own minds. Okay, so we get this first person experience. And this inspires renunciation to samsaric dukkha, a desire to not get imprisoned by that anymore. So renunciation, they're not talking about you have to be poor, eat a bowl of rice every day and give up the, what do people have now? They have like big flat screen, 70-inch TVs and stuff. That's a pretty big one, right? Yeah. So it's not about giving that up. It's about giving up the delusional thinking of the exaggerated qualities that we attribute to people, places, and things. So we recognize this is not the way to find our happiness. It's not the way we want to live. We develop renunciation for ourselves. When we extend our perspective to see all other sentient beings in this light, compassion arises. Although we're not always aware of it. Oops, I need to move this thing up. Are closely connected to all these sentient beings. So we are closely connected. Now, this only is going to bring two perspectives here. First one is very traditional Tibetan Buddhist perspective. We have a 7-point cause and effect method of cultivating bodhicitta. And then another method, equalize, exchange self for others. So he's going to start there. So bearing in mind in Asia and many India and so forth, rebirth and reincarnation, a lot of people call it, that's just the norm. Yeah, of course you're going to die and come back. I mean, West, that's pretty weird stuff. So a lot of people don't, have that, like thing in our minds. Even though there is that, you go to heaven, right? So, okay, I'm going to refrain from the next comment I was going to make. I'm going to behave. So we have this, if we're in a Tibetan culture, it's very simple to recognize, oh, we've been doing this again and again and again. And if you have that baseline understanding, then you're going to recognize this next statement. Since we've been reborn for infinite lifetimes, everyone else has been our parents and raised us with kindness in our previous lives. So everyone's been your mother. That's the mentality they have you really reflect and deepen your understanding that everyone I've met has been my mother. And so if we think about it that way, we go, okay, well, your mother this lifetime, look at what she's done for you, right? All the 9 months and the struggle and then raising you and changing your diapers and, giving you life and doing all that, wow. And then you go, well, if somebody, then there's this whole rational thinking thing that goes on. They go, now, if somebody helped you today and somebody helped you 10 years ago, is the person who helped you 10 years ago any less important than the person who helped you today? Most of the things, no, that was valuable 10 years ago. Okay, so if somebody was your mother in this lifetime and somebody was your mother in last lifetime, is that any less important? Then, rationally we'd think, well, no, of course that was it, And so there's this process within the 7-point cause and effect where one would, go into deeply contemplative meditations, analytical meditations to see if they could actually get a sense of some truth or meaning around that. And they go away for months to do this. Most of us probably not there, right? But his Holiness is going to now present this in a way that we can relate to if you're not in that frame of mind of multiple lives. In this life, too, our ability to stay alive depends on them. They grow our food, they make our clothing, they build our homes, treat our illnesses, and teach us everything that we know. When we look deeply, we see that their kindness to us is limitless. Automatically, compassion and sense of concern for their well-being arises within us. Now, if we were to take some time and recognize, as we've talked about, I think many times, that there is no independence about me. Every single thing about me, John, is because of others, countless others that I will have never met. Not just the people who taught me to read, not just people who made the books, not just the people who made my clothes, not just the people who taught me, not just the people who fed me, not just the people, on and on, that we can start to track down. But we're here today because of people who lived centuries ago that sat down and engaged in these practices and created prayers and aspirations and taught and practiced and created conditions for which we're looking at a text here in a Buddhist center in Carbondale, Colorado, because of people who did things centuries ago across continents to be here. So we start to understand that every aspect of our lives is as a result of not only people living currently, but people who lived through the centuries. And we start to get an inkling of just how dependent we are on others, how much others have helped us, how even the most difficult situations in our lifetimes have given us the resilience to be who we are today. When I understand that, combined with that everyone else is stuck in their own struggle and maybe don't have some of the capacity that I currently do at this moment, we can really recognize that people are like us, trying to find their way and in their own journeys and trying to find their way in this messy thing. We're all in this prison of misperception. We're going to bump into each other a lot. And there's going to be some harm. But instead of getting angry, there's the potential to have compassion. Compassion allows me to deal with the harm in a more appropriate, healthy way with a greater solution-oriented method than anger. So here's this opportunity then, is to start recognizing, first and foremost, everybody else is struggling, just like me. All those other people are benefiting me and giving me the life that I have. Like everything I have in my life is because of these others. Well, then there's a good space to start from. If we get to the multiple lifetimes, then instead of saying things like namaste, which, recognizes the divine within you, I can start saying mamaste. So I can recognize the mom in you and appreciate that you've taken care of me in other lifetimes. So thank you. Yeah. Somebody once made a little bumper sticker, mamaste, let's recognize and honor, the mother in you. And so this is the framework with which to engage in this path. And His Holiness is going to give us some more opportunities to explore just how much others help us. Just as all of our experiences of mundane happiness, prosperity, security, friendship, or simply having enough to eat come in relation to other sentient beings, the fruits of spiritual practice also rely on other beings. Cultivating compassion, practicing generosity, living in ethical conduct, and developing fortitude are all done in relation to other sentient beings. He's actually listing the six, some of the six perfections here: compassion, generosity, ethical conduct, fortitude, which you got about patience. They're all done in relation to other sentient beings. When we cultivate single-pointed concentration or wisdom, our underlying motivation has to do with other sentient beings. Likewise, our attainment of Buddhahood depends on sentient beings. It can only occur when we truly dedicate ourselves to their welfare. Without sentient beings serving as the object of our compassion and care, there is no way for us to create the causes for supreme awakening. Therefore, we can see that when it comes to our own happiness, be it mundane or transcendental, the presence of other sentient beings is indispensable. Pause right there. So now we're really deepening the gifts of others. That how can I practice compassion if I don't have people to teach me about compassion or to be compassionate for? How can I develop fortitude and patience unless you drive me nuts? How can I cultivate these qualities within myself if I don't have others to challenge me, to push me, to help me, to guide me? That it's not just the language, it's not just the life lessons and the learning, but as Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo will point out, it's the sandpaper. It's the sandpaper. None of us are sitting here today at a Buddhist center because it was all good. The first noble truths about suffering. And so out of this discomfort, this dis-ease, we seek, we strive, we want to find a way to be okay, to learn, to grow. And so others have been the incredible conditions, both for the nurturing and the care, and the pain and the hardships, as well as everything in between that. So we can have this opportunity to engage in a life that's meaningful, purposeful, whether on a straightforward, mundane way or a transcendental experience of complete awakening. But we don't always see it that way, right? Yeah, because if those jerks could just, be different, then we'll have it all better. Yeah. And so this is the process of starting to understand more accurately how we exist, not just for ourselves, but in relation to others. And the more that I can sit with that, you're going to obviously start to notice that, oh, yeah, that person yelling at me is suffering. Yeah. There's nothing for me to take personally. Am I going to defend my insecurities, my fears, and my ego? I need to stick up for that. Someone struggling out of their own misperceptions and their own pain. That's a rise for compassion. And my experience being, whether it's in pain or difficulty, are things to feel and experience, not to avoid or shut down, and recognize and learn from, and allow me to grow. And so in this capacity, recognizing it's taking some time. This isn't something we get to have a discussion about and walk out and, we're all good now. Kumbaya. It's going to be challenging. But if we can take some time and start to bring to mind, and that's where the analytical, these teachings are bringing us to what we call the analytical meditations, the Lama and the stages of the path to enlightenment, is to take some time and really analyze, really see whether this is true or not. Does it hold up? And reflect upon it deeply. So we have analytical meditations on, on this specific situations about how we're benefited by others and so forth. And then we go into the world and start to see, is someone out there, really inherently a jerk and a mean individual? Or are they someone who is struggling in certain ways, trying to be happy like me, and has some methods that are harmful, detrimental, creating pain in their lives and others? And have I done anything like that? In my case, yeah, I have. I'm pretty clear. So, I mean, you guys maybe not so much. But yeah, I got a pretty long list of brutality and harm that I've engaged in. So it's kind of ridiculous when I sit there and judge someone else for things that I've probably done. But we do it. Yeah. And that's the conditioning, right? We do it anyway. So the opportunity here is how we start reflecting. And now His Holiness is going to bring to mind some of the benefits of this as well. But I'm just going to pause there, see if anyone has any things that have bubbled up question-wise or comment-wise, either online or in person here. One of the things that I have bubbled up to is, I think my computer might be running out. Well, we're good for a minute. Absolutely. I was hoping you have an answer. We'll go with the question.
I have a question.
Okay.
With what you just shared about having compassion for others who are acting in harmful ways by reflecting on your own conduct from your past, where does like power come into play with that? This is kind of an analytical question, but
We like analytical questions.
if a person who's causing harm, how do you grapple with that? Like, how do you come to terms with that if they're in a position of power and their harmful conduct is causing great suffering to many people?
You like read my mind. I was thinking the same thing, actually.
Yeah.
Good.
How do you grapple with that?
Yeah, this is a very important question. I'm glad you brought it up. So
I love being important.
yeah,
Just kidding.
so much better than being impotent. Yeah, that's where I usually land. So online, in case you didn't hear it, the questions around, people doing great harm in the world. And, obviously there's people in positions of authority that are doing that. And people in even smaller things, there's huge amounts of harm, violence, and cruelty in the world. And a lot of people think that compassion is some ambivalent state, when in fact, compassion is an energy and very active. So it's not compassionate to allow someone to do harm, right? Compassion is about removing suffering, not empowering it or enabling it. So when we're talking about having compassion for someone doing harm, compassion will move you to engage with processes or activities to eliminate that harm, okay? The difference is with compassion, I have a lot more resources to respond in skillful ways that might have a long-term effect of eliminating the harm, because I'm not thinking the person's a bad person, right? I'm seeing the individual as completely obscured and engaged in just horrendous delusion and harm and pain, grasping in ways that are beyond my comprehension. They're imprisoned in really harmful ways. So it gives me, instead of an anger and a hatred towards them, it says, how can I help remove this? And now I've got a few more tools. When I got anger, I kind of have one, I don't have a lot of option, right?
Doesn't really go very far.
Yeah.
Creates more problems.
Yeah. So anger just, everything focuses in on just one, and you lose the breadth of opportunity. With compassion, it can say, okay, how can I skillfully, remove this activity, or how can I, in some cases, organize a community of people and make a big change in the world? How can I, I had a picture that I came across. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little goosebumpy. With my teacher, and we were in protesting. We were standing in front of the Chinese consulate, and we got our signs, and compassion's not passive, and the brutality that the Chinese are inflicting, on Tibetans is. But we're not out there yelling at people. Chinese would come up and talk to us, or people would interview, and you could just see the love in my teacher talking about how even worried about the suffering of the Chinese that are inflicting that harm. So, but we're still standing there, and we're still making the case, and we're still doing those things. So people will confuse compassion with being a doormat. And that's the opposite of compassion. Being a doormat is allowing pain and suffering to continue. Compassion gives you some energy to show up in a more skillful way. That makes sense? Yeah. Kind of like, we had a meeting yesterday where guys, was talking about living in a cul-de-sac, and one of the young neighbors just decided to put his music outside and crank it up for the whole thing. And he went out, and it's interesting because his description was pretty funny. He just walked over there and said, "You don't mind if I turn this down?" And he turns it down and, walks back to his thing, right? Which, he didn't yell at the guy or anything, but and upon reflection, he might have been able to say something. This is kind of waking up the whole neighborhood. Would you mind turning it down? But anyway, it was the middle ground, skillful. Yeah. Yeah, John.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about the tools a little more, because, the way I've approached this recently and heard is that being non-judgmental is not judgmental. In other words, you have to say something, right? So, and this is during confrontation that this always comes up. So with the tools, depending upon the situation, sometimes it's too much to ask for the other person to see your point of view, or to see a safe, nonviolent point of view, or non-harmful point of view at that moment, or even over periods of time. So then I have heard that in the very beginning of these situations where you have a person that is hurting other people, that maybe indifference is still a tool. So how is that? You don't just turn your back. You have to say something. It's kind of like when Martin Luther King used to talk about, what did he say? Oh, silence is condoning. So where is that fine line? Where is that one syllable and the whole millions of syllables of yelling back and forth that you can focus on? It's not complete silence, but it's still, you express your point of view with a sign like you did, and then you just don't say anything, and then they might get clobbered, but you still, you started the ball rolling.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if everybody online got all that. I can't repeat it all, but
I shouldn't have started talking.
No. So you find yourself in a confrontational situation, and you covered a couple of things. You used words like non-judgmental and indifference. So those two, I think, non-judgmental, I think is actually a non-existent actual thing. Okay, that doesn't even compute in my mind, actually. We use it as to not be overly judgmental or, good or bad. People use it in our context like that. But we can't survive without judgment or discernment, or is that healthy or not healthy? So we're going to use judgment to do anything. but the context is like they're not a bad person. Like that would be how we kind of use that terminology. And indifference, I was just, and, I think it was Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo. Could have been. I've been listening to Chandra a lot, but the remark was that indifference is like worse than either of the two extremes. Yeah, like indifference is really sneaky, not good for us, not caring. Well, it just creates harm, I mean, to be indifferent in ways that are subtle and sneaky. Anger, we want to do something about, we want to get better, getting overly attached and joyful and attachment. There's going to be some struggle with, and we'll do something, but indifference, we're not, it's a pretty sneaky place to not grow and to constantly empower a way of being that's not very good. So having said that, there's a situation, someone's, I'm encountering. First off, if I am angry, then we got to go to Shantideva, which sometimes the answer is be like wood. Meaning, I'm incapable of doing anything healthy right now. So I won't do anything. I'm going to be like wood until my body regulates. And then I might have some capacity to say something skillful. But when my body's dysregulated and I'm caught up in this, the chance that I'm going to say or do something that's meaningful in a healthy way, pretty slim, right? So you're just saying it's asking too much at that moment. So Shantideva's advice, if we're to that degree, is, to be like wood, get out of the situation, let things settle, and then from a much greater state of equanimity, when we have settled, then if it's meaningful to engage in a way that could be productive, then we would. We have a friend of ours that we have in our work, and he says, conversation in the wrong mood is the wrong conversation. And so wouldn't it be nice to remember that? So instead of indifference, being like wood would actually be a proactive step of taking a healthy, compassionate way of giving yourself the best potential to respond later in a healthier way instead of damaging.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
One thing I learned too is not to use you. I'm feeling, so you're kind of taking away, because some people just get so defensive that you use certain words. So I just feel like there's kind of certain words you would start a conversation with, and certain ones you would not, because right away you're going to have them, coming back at you.
Yeah, words can be tricky.
Attacked.
Yeah, words can be tricky business. Yeah, so there are skillful methods to engage with others. But when you're coming from a place of compassion, understand that even the person doing that harm is a lot like us in that they're also in a prison. Then we have just a lot more space to use different words, to engage differently, to recognize even my own anger isn't who I am, but, to let that settle so I can engage, and that even my anger, doesn't need to create harm right now for myself or others. That Buddhist teachings on anger, can demolish an incredible amount of progress. So we don't want to let that get in the way. And besides that, let's start at this point, because when we're in that situation, we might think I'm right and they're wrong. Yeah, we're all wrong. Okay, let's just start there. Okay, like that's the point being made here. We're all wrong. We're all conditioned. We're all misperceiving this whole experience, and we're all grasping onto a way of existing that isn't accurate. Okay. Let's not get so worked up. Right. But don't go into indifference. Right. It is a prison. There is harm. There are things that we need to do. But we're all wrong, you know. I had this whole talk on how we're all wrong once. It was in, I think it was in New York area. A long time ago, I was a monk. And, you know, it was like, you know, we did this whole thing on how we're all wrong, how we're all misperceptions. And this one guy comes up to me afterwards. He said, I totally get what you're saying. But sometimes people are, or no, I'm less wrong than some other people. So I'm less wrong, you know, sometimes. It was pretty funny. I totally get it too. Sometimes we're less wrong. But just the space of recognizing not just that maybe they're a little more wrong, they're more confused. They're also more imprisoned than we are, maybe, in that moment. Yeah, that was pretty funny. Some people are, yeah, more wrong than others. All right. Let's see if we can get that next little piece here. Yeah, so now he's going to bring in some advice from like Shantideva. So when we see that others are really supporting us, you know, like this is the only way for us to cultivate our path. Then we recognize that even the people doing great harm are the cause for my enlightenment. So it just really shuts down your whole thing when you go complain to your spiritual teacher that, you know, this is, go to an old Lama like my teacher and you go whine about somebody. And they'll tell you, so let me get this straight. You're angry at the cause for your enlightenment. Is that what I'm getting here? Like, never mind. I'm gonna go rethink this. You're mad at the cause of your enlightenment. Okay, back to drawing board. So, seeing this, Shantideva wonders in the text, engaging in bodhisattva deeds, why we revere the Buddhas but not sentient beings. Shouldn't we try to forsake our self-preoccupation and cultivate a sense of endearment and compassion towards them? Because they're the cause for our enlightenment. One line in the 7-point mind training of Geshe Chekwa says that emptiness is the supreme protection. And this is kind of where we're all wrong kind of thing. The idea is that when we're confronted with an obstacle, we should reflect upon the emptiness of the person who is harming, the act of the harm, and ourselves as the recipient of the harm. Okay, so this is a classic meditation on emptiness. You know, does that person exist inherently? Does this action exist inherently? Am I being harmed inherently, independently? And of course, none of that's true, right? That person doesn't exist independently or separately from themselves, from all the things that they've gone through in their lives, from all their experiences, from all the things they've given rise, the culture that we were raised in, the things that gave rise to where someone even do something like that is all, you know, a part of this conditioning, not just this one individual, then the action, and then myself, and then what's really being attacked, and is it really harming me, or is it helping me? You know, what's the attitude? Which way am I taking it? Is it independently a harm, or is it also containing some seeds of some growth or potential, or what? So if you were to start to recognize the emptiness of this whole thing, and then you're not going to what we call reify the situation. Yeah, independently, so-and-so's a jerk. They did this to me. I got hurt. I hate them. Which is kind of what we do, right? So, but again, and you know, this takes a little time. So, but this is the ultimate protection, because in this stage, you recognize that nobody's harming you. They might harm your body. That's not who you are. They might harm your ego. That's not who you are. They might offend your insecurity, but that's not who you are. You know, those are all mental, emotional states that come and go. And And when you get that, you recognize, who's there to harm, So that takes a little bit to get to, though. But I do like the idea, and I think it's very helpful when we get offended or something. Is like, I don't really need to stand up for my mental afflictions. I don't need to stand up for my insecurity and defend that. My insecurity is strong enough, man. I need help from me. I don't need to stick up for it. And don't you know who I am, or all that. Once we actually know that we're worthy and valuable, you don't need to defend it. We all have Buddha nature. We all are valuable. We're already enough. We're already okay. And that which is not okay is not who I am. That's the afflictions that are blocking who I am. And so that's also a real helpful piece in this way. So by contemplating that none of these has any independent self-nature, but exists in dependence upon the other two, we're able to counter the obstacle. Similarly, meditating on compassion towards the agent of harm is a strong method to cut the intensity of our sense of injury. Instead of harboring malice towards the person, cultivating a sense of concern, caring, and compassion for them is the most powerful kind of protection. And so that's the piece we were kind of talking about, is if I have compassion towards them, it's really going to lessen the intensity and give me a lot more space to respond in healthier ways. And then bottom line, you're just not going to take on as much pain and suffering. So, it's really very beneficial. It's amazing how, I'm just going to pause there, how much tendency there is to grab onto resentment and hatred as though somehow that's helpful. I am never going to forgive you. I'm going to suffer for the rest of my life. Right? That's a hard one. As though if we actually let go of that pain, somehow that other person's life will get all better. We'll sprinkle fairy dust on them or something. I'm the one who's suffering when I don't forgive, not them. And, intellectually we can know this, but boy, that can be a hard thing to do. It can be a really hard thing to do. But when we recognize, and the point being made here is that when I forgive, I'm giving myself permission to heal. I'm giving myself permission to stop suffering. And then I'm more helpful. Doesn't condone what anyone does, but it allows a way to engage the world in a more skillful, healthier, meaningful way. So in this way, you can see where our minds are so much the problem, not the person, not the event, not the thing. Unless they're hitting you with a baseball bat, in which case they're pretty much the problem. So these are things where your question is so important, is people mistake loving kindness and compassion for enabling and doormats and abuse. And there's absolutely nothing passive about loving kindness or compassion. Loving kindness is an incredible strong desire to have people really be well. And there's no way for people to be well if they're acting in non-virtuous ways. So the whole focus of the idea here of Buddhism is that all suffering arises from non-virtue. All happiness from virtue. So if I love someone and I want them to be happy, I'm going to do my best to eliminate the non-virtue. Create conditions where hopefully they'll find a way to be more virtuous. And that might mean locking someone up for some years because they're not going to do as much harm maybe in the world. That can be an act of loving kindness. But it's not done with the mind that says they're evil, they need to be locked up. It's saying they're out of control and harming others, they need to be locked up. And I hope that they change. And sometimes they do, you know. I know a couple people have been to prison. Pretty nice people these days. Some people. So the understanding then is, if I start to understand how I do this to myself, I can start to recognize how others do it to themselves. And then I can start to recognize how much pain and suffering is inflicted in this world because people are just self-centered, focused, misconceiving causes of happiness and suffering and doing a lot of harm. And in the midst of all that, it's really important to see all the kindness. That underneath all that harm, the vast majority of human beings are trying to help others be okay. We can't miss that point. We're all in a prison, but in this prison, we're really trying to find a way to be okay. And that's why we got so many people volunteering and doing good things and taking care of neighbors and donating time and energy and resources and the love and the care that is all around us. It's important to see that too. And that gets blocked out when we start focusing on, that thing or that person. We don't see all the other people who are making a real positive difference. Okay, there might be a question in the chat. Oh, good question. Is loving kindness the same as compassion? They're two sides of a coin. They're not quite the same. The loving kindness is described as the desire, the deep wish for others to be what we call genuinely happy, well. Compassion is I don't want them to suffer. So they're very related. Obviously, if you're not suffering, you might have a chance to be well. But they're actually different, and they affect even I believe you even see the mind stream just a little bit differently. I know more about compassion. One day I'll learn about loving kindness, but you got to ask Laura about that. She's better at that. But compassion is this incredible energy, motivator, resource, strength that affects even the executive function of the brain in a very different way, and lights us up and has a reward response. Loving kindness, I don't know as much about, but they're very much related, obviously. But the compassion is this, this strong motivating force to remove suffering, to not want people to suffer, and you care for them. Loving kindness is I want them to be happy. I want them to be well. So they're very related, but they are subtly different as well in different ways. Two sides of the same coin. And they're different practices to cultivate them. Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's a good spot to wrap up on for the evening. I did remember to hit record, so I'm going to put that in the plus column. And let's just take a little time to dedicate the merit that we've cultivated from our time together. And I'm going to invite you this week to, start to notice this tendency that we have around how we judge and see others. Are they, how quickly we label them without seeing the totality of them. And see, can we recognize, how they benefit us? Maybe you can't see them as your mothers yet. One practice that, we use a lot that I like is to just start recognizing everyone, seeing them as an old dear friend. His Holiness will say that. And it's cool to see people like that. And even people you don't know. Now I'm not indifferent. That's an old dear friend. Now, sometimes my old dear friend pisses me off and I like him so much. But, it's Jimmy, And so, Jimmy, he's like that sometimes. But what I found in my life, it really alters my my interactions with people even that I don't know. So even when we counter people we find challenging, think of them as an old dear friend or someone who has benefited us, and see how that shifts our experience. That'll be the invitation this week. And now let's dedicate the merit that we've already cultivated this Wednesday evening. By this merit may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare